What's going on, everybody? Welcome into episode 58 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast on this Wednesday, March 5th, 2025. I'm your host, Zach Malama. Before we get started, please subscribe below. Follow all of my social accounts. Let's start things off in the NBA as the New York Knicks were in action last night, and the Knicks, a hard one to take and a hard one to judge as the Knicks fall to the Golden State Warriors 114 to 102 on primetime television. They were without Karl Anthony Towns for this game due to personal reasons, a late absence in Cat, and obviously they didn't find out till really 4 or 5 o'clock that Cat would not be playing tonight, according to Tom Thibodeau. So in the end, you go into this game with the late absence of Karl Anthony Towns, and you're not thinking too much here as they take on a tough Warriors team that obviously added Jimmy Butler before the trade deadline, and they're still figuring things out and trying to really chase after the Western Conference, a very tough Western Conference, and still staying afloat 34-28 now. They are in the Western Conference, but this game was all about Steph Curry. What a player. I mean, one of the top 20, top 15 players in NBA history, and some people may even say top 10, with what he is able to do on a nightly basis. He had 28 points in this one, 5 3-pointers. How about 9 assists and 7 rebounds? He just continues to find ways to deliver. And how about his record in the bright lights in New York City at Madison Square Garden? 12-1 in his NBA career, and he's 13-1 if you include his collegiate career from his time at Davidson. What a player he is. Like I said, in the top 20 definitely in NBA history, and he's proving why year in, year out, and day out, why he's one of the best that the NBA has ever seen. I mean, just what a player, and continues to find ways to win the Warriors games and just carry them to victories. He's done that year after year, and even when the Warriors had a maybe even a bit of a down year playing in the play-in game, it's all because of Steph Curry that they're even in that spot and really even staying afloat. It's really all about Steph Curry. So what a player, and he obviously delivers again, a 114-102 victory for the Golden State Warriors. And now the Knicks head on this West Coast road trip. They have a 5-game West Coast road trip, and the status of Karl Anthony Towns is still in question. That is a massive, massive question mark for the New York Knicks, because if they are without Cat, who's going to really step up in his absence? Of course, they got a guy like Mitchell Robinson back in the lineup. Perfect timing for something like that. However, I mean, he can only hold the load so much more on the defensive side that he'll hold things down. Really offensively, the Knicks are going to have to rely on different guys to come up big in terms of scoring. Mikal Bridges has been abysmal recently and really not worth that package that the Knicks gave up for him this offseason. And then you're looking at OG Anunoby, who had a really good game yesterday, actually, against the Warriors, had 29 points in the end, tried to pick up some of the slack that they would be missing without Karl Anthony Towns. But he did a great job. He needs to keep that going and be consistent on it if Cat does miss more time. Still in question. We'll see what happens. But the Knicks, starting their 5-game road trip, they go to the Crypto.com Arena, taking on the Los Angeles Lakers, 10 o'clock tomorrow night. And that one should be a great game, as you saw even a couple weeks ago when the Knicks took on the Lakers. Great game, but that was still when Anthony Davis was on the team. It was actually the night of the Luka trade. And that one obviously has changed things for the Los Angeles Lakers, but they are maybe even better now, a lot of people would say, after that trade for Luka Doncic. It's going to be a very tough game for the New York Knicks, and definitely not going to be favored heading into that one tomorrow. But then they go to LA once again. They just go to the southern part of Los Angeles, down in Inglewood. They'll take on the LA Clippers the night after, second of a back-to-back, and then they have a trip to Sacramento, then Portland, and then they finish off Saturday, March 15th at Golden State. So we'll see what happens. Some tough games coming up for the New York Knicks, and obviously the big question of Karl Anthony Towns. Will he play? Will he not? That's obviously a massive, massive deal if the Knicks do not have their star man and Cat in the lineup for any of those games out west. So we'll see what happens. And obviously, we'll preview that Clippers game and recap that Lakers game on Friday's episode. So make sure you tune in. Let's switch things up and finish things off today with a college basketball update and just a little recap of yesterday's games. What a slate we had on Tuesday, and some big time upsets in college basketball. March is here and just upsets flying everywhere. We'll start off with the big one as number one goes down, their third loss of the season. The Auburn Tigers now sit at 27-3, still a phenomenal record, still the number one team in the country in my mind. But how about the Texas A&M Aggies, who had a little bit of a rough stretch recently and lost some games, dropped pretty big and had a pretty big drop, down to number 22 in the rankings. They were 12 before they lost big time to Florida at the weekend. Then they bounced back with a monster win, knocking off the number one team in the country. First time in program history that the Aggies have knocked off number one, and they win it 83-72, and a phenomenal win. And I really can't think too much into this one for Auburn. They were bound to lose a game in SEC play, and obviously that's their second loss in SEC play this season, the other one being to Florida at home. I mean, two tough games, especially on the road now at Texas A&M. It just was not their night, and give credit to the Aggies. They played very, very well in this one, and obviously had that 6-point halftime advantage, and that really, they were able to pull away from there. So big time win. Aggies get a massive one, and Auburn loses one in SEC play. Like I said, bound to happen. Can't think too much of it. They're still the top team in the country in my mind. Very tough team and full of depth and very well coached. And we'll see them very deep into March in my mind. Let's go to the other upset, and a big one in Ames, Iowa, at Hilton Coliseum. Number 23 BYU goes on the road, knocks off number 10 Iowa State, and the Cyclones have just been all over the place. They did mount a comeback in this one. They were down 9 at halftime, mount the comeback 44-35 in the second half. They outscore BYU, and then in overtime, they end up tying, and then, of course, in double overtime, BYU gets the edge. 88-85, this one is won by BYU. Massive upset for them, and obviously that's going to be a team to watch out for in March. They're 13-6 in Big 12 play. Not an easy conference, and they are making things look very easy. And a lot of people said, all right, well, a lot of their upsets coming at home. They haven't really done too much there. They've now gone to Arizona as well as Iowa State and won those games. So, I mean, you got to give credit where credit is due. BYU is the real deal, and credit to them. Obviously, with a full change, coaching, it comes in, and a new coach comes in, and a new regime, and a lot of new players. They really haven't missed a step there, and credit to BYU. They get another upset on the road. Let's look at the last couple of games, and a phenomenal high-scoring affair in Arizona as a rivalry matchup, and the Wildcats defeat the Sun Devils 113-100. If you like defense, not the game for you. And Arizona gets another big win on their home floor. Still 20-10 on the year, and then 14-5 in Big 12 play. They've got some big non-conference losses that may hurt them in terms of a seeding, but still in the top 25, still in the AP poll, and cruising along. Kentucky blows out LSU 95-64. Purdue blows out Rutgers 100-71, and obviously that's a big couple of wins for those two teams, bouncing back, both of them, after a couple of losses. Let's look at tonight's games and maybe even a little bit of tomorrow. The big one tonight, 6:30, is 13 Maryland taking on 17 Michigan. That one, the big one in the Big Ten. The other big one, probably the biggest one across the nation, is going to be down in the SEC. Number 5 Florida taking on number 7 Alabama, a rivalry matchup down at Coleman Coliseum in Tuscaloosa. And Alabama, obviously at number 7 right now, and looking to bounce back after a couple losses here and there, but they're still figuring things out. And obviously the Crimson Tide are going back and forth right now, and they are coming off the loss at the buzzer to Tennessee the other day, and a hard one to bounce back from after a couple of solid wins against Kentucky and Mississippi State. But they just get back to normal, and obviously this is a long week for the Crimson Tide, as they had Tennessee at the weekend, Florida midweek, and how about Auburn at the other weekend? I mean, just what a gauntlet the SEC is, and obviously Alabama is facing the biggest part of that, especially heading into this week and then next week in the SEC tournament. So we'll see what happens, but I expect that Maryland-Michigan game to be very close, and Michigan coming off the loss to Illinois, blown out by 20. But Maryland's not going to just lay down here. They are coming off a loss themselves to Michigan State last week that they're still trying to bounce back from, and obviously they want to get some revenge here in the Big Ten, and they sit at 12-6 and really end on a high note here heading into the Big Ten tournament next week. That one should be great, and we'll see what happens there. But the rest of the games tonight, just one more that I'll talk about, is number 20 Marquette heading to Gamble Pavilion in Storrs, Connecticut to take on UConn. This one's a phenomenal game. 8:30 start as you look at Marquette, 22-7, 13-5 in Big East play. Had that rough week, and they've done a good job of steadying the ship here. And Shaka Smart's guys are really battle-tested, I would say. And when you look at UConn on the other side, they're just trying to rack up wins and keep things going. If they get a win here, I think there's no doubt in people's minds that UConn is a solid, probably 8 or 9 seed, maybe even a 7 seed, depending on how they do in the Big East tournament. Depending on that, I still think they're a solid enough tournament team. And even though it's been a down year for the Huskies, they are still right in the fight. And definitely when March comes around, anything can happen. And obviously UConn is one of those teams that could shock many people, even though it's been a down year, like I said, for the Huskies. So we'll see what happens, but what a great matchup that'll be in Storrs tonight. And obviously some great matchups around it. Then you look at just quickly tomorrow's game. Number 8 Michigan State goes on the road to take on Iowa. They have one game in hand, or not one game in hand. They will have a game in hand after Michigan plays tonight, but they will then have a 1-game lead over Michigan if Michigan wins and Michigan State wins. We'll see what happens then on Sunday when those teams meet. We'll obviously preview that matchup on Friday's episodes. That's going to be a phenomenal game on Sunday. Can't wait for that one, with the final game of the regular season in the Big Ten, and should be a phenomenal game to watch out for. But all these college basketball games coming around, great time of the year, and buzzer beaters, upsets, they're everywhere as March is here and the NCAA tournament just around the corner. And we'll have all the noise and all the recaps and previews for that as we come up in the next couple of weeks or so. But that'll do it for episode 58 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast. Please subscribe below. I've been Zach Malama. Thanks for watching, and talk to you all on Friday.